Hi, welcome back. It's good to be with you again as we look at the lessons for the upcoming Sunday. And this is one of my favorite Sundays of the year. It is the fourth Sunday of Easter, which is traditionally Good Shepherd Sunday. Every year in the 3-year cycle, the lessons today focus on Jesus as the Good Shepherd. The psalm is always Psalm 23, one of the most beloved psalms. But it's that whole image of shepherd that we get to celebrate this Sunday.
And yet, as familiar as we are with the image of shepherd, at least from our experiences in the church, I wonder if we really understand the shepherd. And certainly, as you've pointed out before, there are vastly different understandings of shepherd between what we have in the New Testament and what we have in the Old Testament.
Yeah, the Old Testament image of shepherd was an honorable profession. It was something that if you were a shepherd in the Old Testament, that was a good thing, because David, the quintessential king, the model king for Israel, was a shepherd, and because of that, all the kings of Israel were seen as their job description was to be shepherd, to shepherd Israel, to follow Yahweh, to know Yahweh, to understand his law, to understand Torah, all of those kinds of things. So shepherd was, and as we see that throughout the Old Testament, there are very positive images to shepherd. When we come to the New Testament, by the first century, shepherds were really seen as being rugged, being distrustful, and as I was doing some reading this week, it was mainly because of property rights. Because shepherds would often disregard any property boundaries when they were grazing their sheep. And so they wouldn't care and they would just go on someone else's property. And so that was seen to be just disregarding any boundaries. It was seen as taking what wasn't theirs. Plus, shepherds were often away from home for long periods of time. So they were unable to appropriately take care of their family, take care of the woman folk, so to speak. But so they were so the reputation fell. So shepherds were not to be trusted, and there are even writings that say that shepherds were not even allowed in the city limits of some towns and villages. They were so distrusted.
Wow.
So it's really interesting to me then that Jesus uses the image of shepherd to refer to himself. I mean, most of John 10, the whole beginning, is all about Jesus talking about how he is the good shepherd. It's one of the great I am statements of John's gospel, along with I am the vine, and you are the branches, I am the living water, I am the bread of life, all of these different I am statements, which means a really interesting way of a construction, grammatical construction.
Right. I wonder if, so coming up with this Sunday, with the readings, we certainly, and I want to get into the gospel reading for sure, because there's some nuggets in there that I think are really helpful. But it's interesting that the psalm this week is that beloved Psalm 23, probably the most well-known psalm, the one that probably most people can recite, even using the maybe the King James language. I mean, that's how beloved this psalm is. And I wonder if there is any danger in being so familiar with a psalm that maybe is it possible that we miss some of the power that's behind the sentiment and the words of the psalm?
I think so. It's designated as a song of trust, which absolutely it is, because it comes to that whole thing about, the shepherd is someone that as a sheep, they would trust this person. And so it is this song of trust, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It's the shepherd that supplies every need. And there's so many songs, I can think of so many anthems and hymns that have those words to it. But yeah, it's that whole idea of the shepherd, trusting that shepherd, that song of trust. But I think we do miss some of the power. I wonder if sometimes for us, we equate having such trust in God as trusting that God is going to take away all of our pain. God will completely take away any need. God will take away any suffering. God will take away any difficulty in our life. And I think that's where the challenge comes with that psalm, because that's not what the psalm says.
Right. Absolutely.
Because if you look at the psalm, it gets, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, it doesn't say that God's going to, direct us away from the valley of the shadow of death, or God's going to reach down with his divine fingers and pluck us out and put us in a safe place. No, he says, even though I walk through the valley, it assumes that, we're going to have those times.
Right. Right.
It talks about, but when we're there, we fear no evil because we are not alone. But it says, the shepherd will prepare a table in the midst of enemies.
In the midst of my enemies.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that God's going to, again, divine fingers come down, grab you and take you away from your enemies and put you in a safe place. It assumes that there will be times that life is going to stink. Mm-hmm. But when those things happen, God is with us.
And the issue, like you said, it's an issue of trust.
Right.
Which trust then speaks volumes, I think, in John's gospel itself, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's all about trust, right?
Absolutely.
Especially when Jesus is talking about the sheep hearing the voice.
Right. My sheep hear my voice, they know me, and they follow me. I mean, what a beautiful thought. Let me just read it just to get it right. My sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. What my Father has given me is greater than all else, and no one can snatch it out of the Father's hand. I mean, that is incredible. What a statement of power and a call to trust in God.
And think of the power that a familiar voice has over you.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it be calling out your name, in grabbing your attention, there's that comfort. I can only imagine if you're a child and you're lost and you hear your parents' voice. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, life is okay. Right. And I wonder if that's where Jesus is going with this.
Right.
Hey, I've got this. You know my voice.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, maybe the best way we can get around this is to ask the question, who do we trust?
Whose voice do we trust?
Yeah. Like who do you trust? I mean, maybe I shouldn't, but I trust your voice all the time.
Oh, that was your first mistake. That's okay. Well,
but no, seriously, there are times when if something happens or, depending what is going on, I just need to hear your voice, whether it's in person or even just on the other end of the phone. Mm-hmm. If something has happened, I call you and you come. So does Jubal. Yeah. But it's that voice that it just gives me such security and hope, knowing that I'm not alone. Mm-hmm. And so, so think about those people that you trust implicitly.
Right.
And then maybe multiply that times 10 or 100 or something. And that's the shepherd. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah, and so you had pointed out too that there are other characters in the story in John's Gospel who hear the voice, who hear Jesus' voice. I don't want to take away your thunder.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead. I've got this thunder.
Well, yeah. But you had mentioned, of course, Mary Magdalene at the tomb, hearing her name, hearing that voice, but hearing her name. I can think of a couple of other characters in John's Gospel who respond to the voice.
Yeah.
Lazarus.
That was,
Lazarus, come out. The voice, come out.
Yeah, come out of the tomb.
Come out of the tomb, yeah.
Exactly.
Think about those disciples after the resurrection. That first Easter evening, they were locked behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. You said this before. They were in their own tomb. Mm-hmm. Jesus comes through the wall or the door, whatever it is, and we're told he stood among them, and immediately, he spoke. His voice spoke to them. Mm-hmm. Peace be with you.
Right.
And then the next week when he came back a second time and Thomas was there, before he said to Thomas, here, touch me, the first thing he said again, that voice said, peace be with you.
Right.
And it always strikes me that whenever God is doing amazing things, it's prefaced with, peace be with you. Mm-hmm. I just think that's powerful, that voice.
Right.
So for me, the question is, so whose voice are we going to listen to? And I think I'm not sure exactly yet, this early on in the week, where my sermon is going. By the time you Incarnate Word people see this video, you will have already heard my sermon, because this is a few days later. But I'm really intrigued with that idea of whose voice are you going to listen to, and why?
Right.
Whose voice can you trust?
Right.
And that seems like a question that we can always be wrestling with.
And then where do we go with that trust? When we hear that voice, when we're called out, when we know that Jesus is the one we can trust, what does that compel us to do? How does that change us?
Yeah. I think we can ask that of ourselves as individuals. I think we can ask that as a congregation too. In times that maybe at times feel scarce to us in terms of resources, of time, talent, treasure. In the midst of that perceived scarcity, is there still a voice calling us to trust? And where are we going with that? Right.
Yeah, I think we hear so much about the church nowadays where, the church is in decline. We just don't have as many people. We don't, that churches are closing their doors. And that's a very frightening thing. Could that, even for the church, be the valley of the shadow of death? As we're looking at that and looking at our own resources and saying, are they going to last? Are they going to play out? Are we going to have enough? Are we going to have enough money? Are we going to have enough people? Are we going to have time? How are we going to do this? And we can get into this downward spiral. But realizing, that, God is with us, not plucking us out of that, but with us, calling us to trust and to take that risk and to continue to reach out, not circle the wagons and turn in on ourselves.
And in the midst of the anxiety, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Right? So God, God is not abandoning us.
Right.
So I guess that's going to be the challenge for me in the midst of my own struggles from time to time, that I feel, even with my faith journey, to trust that God is there, that God's got the rod and the staff guiding me, making sure that I'm not alone in all this, that I know that I'm not alone in all this, not taking me away from it on some magical spaceship journey. That'd be fun, but God's not going to do that. But knowing that in the midst of it, God is with me. Maybe that's all. Maybe ultimately in the end, that's all we need to know.
Yeah, and I often say that I basically preach one sermon with a bunch of different sermon illustrations, and that's it. God is with us at all times, in all places, and God will lead us.
And that's the name of your church,
Immanuel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So just a few thoughts on the shepherd. So thank you.
Are you still there, folks?
Sorry, the dog just grabbed the phone.
Wow. Well, we're going to keep this in.
We'll keep that in there, though. We're not going to edit it out. So you never know what you're going to find when you come to our place and share these stories with us.
And it keeps our dogs alive if we keep this on, because we'll kill them if this thing goes off. I'm only kidding. Yeah, you heard it.
So I think they're telling us it's time to sign off. So thanks for being with us. Some thoughts for this week, and we look forward to being with you again next time. Bye-bye.
God bless.